Anderson had not seen the Kane estate in 8 years. Yet the moment the gates appeared through the rain, every wound inside him reopened instantly. The mansion stood enormous against the storm-dark sky. Cold white stone. Towering windows. Perfect gardens. Beautiful. Soulless. Tina sat silently beside him in the car, watching his expression harden more with every passing second. This place hurt him. She could see it physically. His jaw remained tight. His breathing too controlled. His eyes distant now. Like part of him already returned to being the unwanted boy standing outside those gates in the rain years ago. Victor's convoy stopped behind them. Armed men remained nearby. Precautions. Necessary ones. Because nobody trusted Damien Kane. Especially not his son. Anderson stared at the mansion quietly. Then softly whispered something Tina almost didn't hear. She died begging him for help. God. The grief inside that sentence shattered her. Tina immediately reached for his hand. Anderson froze slightly beneath the touch. Then slowly intertwined their fingers automatically. Like instinct. Like survival. Tina squeezed gently. You're not alone this time. The words hit him harder than expected. Because yes. Years ago he stood here powerless and grieving with no one beside him. Now. Tina sat beside him. Victor waited behind him. Eli slept safely elsewhere because Anderson protected him. Everything had changed. And yet. The pain remained exactly the same. Anderson finally stepped out of the vehicle. Rain immediately soaked through his dark coat. He didn't care. The front doors opened before he reached them. Damien Kane stood waiting. Tall. Perfectly dressed. Cold-eyed. The resemblance between father and son felt unsettling instantly. Same sharp features. Same intimidating presence. But where Anderson carried pain, Damien carried emptiness. Tina physically felt the difference the moment she saw him. God. Now she understood why Anderson feared becoming this man. Damien's eyes landed first on Anderson. Then Tina. Then Victor. No warmth existed anywhere in his expression. Only calculation. You brought an audience. Anderson stopped a few feet away. Rain dripping from his hair. Hatred visible in every line of his body. You know my son's name. Straight to it. No greetings. No pretending. Damien looked mildly unimpressed. He's my grandson. The sentence exploded something violent inside Anderson instantly. Don't. His voice came deadly quiet. You don't get to call him that. Victor immediately stepped closer subtly. Watching Anderson carefully. Because rage was dangerously close now. Damien studied his son calmly. You've become emotional. Anderson laughed once. Coldly. You destroyed my mother. The storm seemed to pause around them. Tina's heartbeat became frantic. Because finally, the real war started. Damien's expression didn't change. She involved herself in matters beyond her understanding. The casualness shattered Anderson's control instantly. He moved so fast Tina barely saw it. 1 second standing still. The next. Anderson slammed Damien hard against the marble wall near the entrance. Victor cursed sharply. Guards reached for weapons immediately. No. Tina screamed. Anderson's hand closed around his father's throat violently. Years of hatred finally erupting. You let her die. Damien looked strangely calm despite the chokehold. Almost bored. She threatened powerful men. And she was right. The roar echoed through the rain. God. Tina had never heard pain sound so violent before. Anderson's entire body shook now. Not from weakness. From years of buried grief finally exploding. You made me watch her die. Damien finally looked directly into his son's eyes. And quietly said the cruelest thing imaginable. She made you weak. Silence. Then everything changed. Anderson's expression emptied completely afterward. No shouting. No visible rage. Worse. Nothing. Victor immediately understood the danger. Because Anderson only became this calm right before terrible things happened. Tina rushed forward, grabbing Anderson's arm desperately. Andy. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Damien continued coldly. I gave you strength afterward. The words physically sickened Tina. Strength. No. Violence. Manipulation. Cruelty. Anderson slowly released his father. Not mercy. Control. Damien adjusted his suit calmly afterward like nothing happened. Then his eyes shifted toward Tina. Interesting choice. The disdain in his tone instantly reignited Anderson. Damien continued smoothly. The daughter of the men who helped destroy your mother. Tina visibly flinched. Anderson stepped between them immediately. Protective instinct. Instant. Damien noticed. Then finally. For the first time. A faint smile touched his face. Cruel. Knowing. There it is. Anderson's eyes darkened lethally. What? Your weakness. The word settled heavily. Damien looked toward Tina again. You love too deeply. God. The sentence hit because it was true. Anderson spent years pretending love weakened men. But now. He would burn entire cities for Tina and Eli. Damien saw that clearly. Anderson's voice lowered dangerously. You stay away from them. Damien ignored the threat completely. Instead, he reached into his coat slowly. Victor instantly raised his weapon. Guards tensed. But Damien only pulled out a photograph. Old. Worn. He handed it toward Anderson calmly. Anderson hesitated before taking it. Then froze completely. The picture showed his mother, Raymond Carter, Damien Kane. Together. Smiling. Years ago. Tina stared in shock. What? Damien's voice remained cold. She wasn't just an employee. The world tilted again. Anderson's grip tightened violently around the photograph. Damien looked directly into his son's eyes. Your mother was my accountant. Silence. She discovered missing money tied to Morelli operations. Victor swore quietly. Because suddenly, everything connected horrifyingly. Damien continued. She threatened exposure. Anderson's breathing became uneven again. Tina looked completely shattered now. Then why? Damien interrupted coldly. Because she chose morality over survival. The cruelty in his voice stunned everyone silent. Anderson stared at the photograph, shaking slightly now. Because for the first time, he realized his mother didn't die because she was powerless. She died because she refused to become like them. Like Damien. Like Morelli. Like the criminal empire. Anderson slowly lifted his eyes toward his father. Then whispered the sentence that changed everything. You killed the only good thing in my life. The hatred inside those words felt almost inhuman. Damien remained calm. You survived. No. Anderson's voice cracked violently. I rotted. Silence swallowed the storm. And for the first time, Tina truly understood something terrifying. Anderson Kane wasn't born dangerous. He was abandoned inside darkness until violence became the only language he knew. Rain crashed violently against the mansion windows while silence swallowed the entrance hall. Anderson still held the photograph tightly in trembling hands. His mother smiling beside the two men who eventually destroyed her life. God. Nothing hurt worse than realizing she once trusted them. Tina stood frozen beside him, trying to process everything. Raymond Carter knew Sarah Hale personally. Damien Kane worked closely with her. The accident. The cover-up. Morelli. It all connected now like poison finally surfacing. Victor watched Damien carefully. The older man remained disturbingly calm despite the hatred surrounding him. That alone unsettled Victor deeply. Because men like Damien only stayed calm when they still believed they controlled the board. Anderson slowly looked up. His eyes burned now. Not with explosive rage. Something colder. Sharper. You let me hate the wrong people for years. Damien adjusted his cufflinks casually. You needed direction. The cruelty of the answer physically sickened Tina. Direction. He was talking about grief like it was training. Anderson laughed softly. Brokenly. You made me into your dog. Silence. Damien's expression hardened slightly for the first time. I made you survive. No. Anderson stepped closer slowly. Rainwater dripping from his dark coat onto the marble floor. You made me empty. The words landed heavily. Because everyone inside that room knew they were true. Tina looked at Anderson's face and suddenly realized something heartbreaking. He still carried the frightened boy inside him. The boy who begged for love at these gates. The boy who lost his mother. The boy forced into violence too early. And somehow, that wounded child still existed beneath all the darkness. Damien's eyes suddenly shifted toward Tina again. Then calmly toward Victor. Finally. He said the one thing nobody expected. The child should stay away from Anderson. Everything stopped instantly. Anderson's entire body went still. Victor cursed under his breath quietly. Tina's heartbeat exploded. Damien continued coldly. You think fatherhood redeems men like him? The insult carried deliberate poison. He's unstable. Anderson moved before anyone reacted. Victor barely caught him in time. No. Anderson struggled violently against him now. Pure rage. Because Damien wasn't insulting him anymore. He was threatening his place in Eli's life. You do not speak about my son. The possessiveness in his voice echoed through the mansion like violence itself. Damien remained unimpressed. You think love changes blood? God. That sentence hit somewhere deep and ugly inside Anderson. Because suddenly, fear surfaced beneath the rage. What if Damien was right? What if violence truly lived inside him permanently? What if Eli someday became like him? Damien saw the hesitation instantly. And smiled faintly. Cruel. You already know. Tina stepped forward immediately. No. Everyone looked toward her. Tina's eyes filled with tears again. But her voice remained steady. You don't get to decide who Anderson becomes anymore. Damien's expression cooled slightly. You sound naive. And you sound empty. The answer shocked even Anderson. Tina moved closer toward him deliberately. Then grabbed his hand. Publicly. Fearlessly. This man almost died protecting my son. The words echoed heavily through the hall. Your son. Damien corrected coldly. Tina's expression hardened instantly. No. She squeezed Anderson's hand tighter. Eli is his son. God. Something inside Anderson cracked painfully hearing that. Not because of possession. Because Tina chose him openly. Even here. Even knowing everything. Damien studied both of them silently. Then softly laughed. Amazing. The sound carried no warmth. She still loves you after learning her father helped ruin your mother. The truth hit brutally. Anderson looked down briefly. Because yes. That still hurt. Still confused him. Still tore him apart. But then Tina's fingers tightened around his again. Grounding him instantly. Damien noticed everything. The connection. The dependence. The loyalty. And for the first time, Something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. Interest. Victor saw it immediately. And hated it. Because Damien Kane only became interested in things he planned to use. Damien slowly walked toward Anderson. Close enough now to feel the tension vibrating between them. Then quietly said, "Do you know why I truly kept you alive?" Anderson's jaw tightened. "I don't care." "You should." Silence settled heavily. Then Damien delivered the truth like a knife. "Because Morelli wanted you dead as a child." The world stopped. Victor physically stiffened. Tina gasped softly. Anderson stared blankly. "What?" Damien continued calmly. "Your mother copied financial evidence before her death." Every word sharpened the nightmare further. "She hid it." Anderson's breathing slowed dangerously. "Where?" Damien's eyes darkened slightly. "She never told me." Silence exploded. Then realization hit all at once. Sarah Hale died protecting evidence powerful enough to threaten entire criminal networks. And Anderson. God. Anderson spent years believing his mother died powerless and forgotten. But she died fighting. Victor finally understood too. That's why Morelli targeted the house tonight. Damien nodded once. They think the boy might have information. Tina's blood turned cold instantly. What? Anderson's expression changed completely afterward. Not rage anymore. Worse. Protective terror. Because suddenly, Eli wasn't only his son. He was leverage. A possible threat. A target. Absolutely not. Anderson stepped toward Damien slowly. Every word afterward came terrifyingly calm. "If anyone touches my child..." Silence. "I will erase entire bloodlines." Even Victor felt unsettled hearing it. Because Anderson meant every syllable completely. Damien studied his son carefully then. And for the first time, something almost resembling respect appeared in his eyes. "There you are." The sentence chilled Tina instantly. Because suddenly, she understood something horrifying. Damien Kane liked the violent parts of Anderson. He always had. Anderson noticed too. Disgust crossed his face immediately. "You're sick." Damien looked genuinely unsurprised. "I'm realistic." "No. Monster." That's what Tina wanted to say. Because now she finally saw the truth clearly. Damien Kane didn't destroy Anderson accidentally. He shaped him intentionally. Violence was inheritance to men like him. Anderson suddenly grabbed Damien's collar hard. Victor moved instantly. Guards raised weapons. Tina gasped. But Anderson only leaned close enough for his father alone to hear. "You will never come near Eli." Damien looked directly into his son's eyes. Then quietly whispered back. "He already has your darkness." The sentence shattered something inside Anderson instantly. Because suddenly, fear swallowed the rage whole. Not fear for himself. For Eli. And for the first time since becoming a father, Anderson Kane truly became terrified of what blood might pass from father to son. Anderson didn't speak during the entire drive back. Not once. Rain streaked across the windows while Victor drove in tense silence beside him. Tina sat in the back holding Anderson's hand tightly. He barely reacted. That terrified her more than anger would have. Because Damien's final words clearly reached somewhere deep inside him. "He already has your darkness." God. The sentence poisoned everything. Tina could physically feel Anderson spiraling beside her now. Quietly. Internally. Dangerously. When they finally reached Victor's estate, Anderson stepped out immediately without waiting for anyone. Tina hurried after him. "Andy." No response. He kept walking through the long hallway toward Eli's room. Fast. Purposeful. Almost desperate. Victor caught Tina's arm gently. Give him a second. She looked toward him helplessly. He's shutting down. Victor's expression darkened. No. A pause. He's afraid. That hit differently. Because yes. Anderson Kane looked terrified tonight. Not of Morelli. Not of Damien. Of himself. The bedroom door opened quietly. Soft warm light spilled across the hallway while Eli slept peacefully tangled in blankets. One small hand curled beneath his cheek. Completely innocent. Completely unaware of the darkness surrounding his existence now. Anderson stopped breathing the moment he saw him. God. The child looked so small. Too small for this world already trying to consume him. Anderson slowly sat beside the bed. Silent. Still. Then carefully brushed Eli's messy hair back from his forehead. The little boy stirred softly but didn't wake. Trusting. Safe. The sight physically hurt. Because suddenly, Anderson remembered himself at that age. Afraid. Lonely. Always listening for screaming or violence. No child should live like that. Especially not Eli. Never Eli. Tina quietly entered the room moments later. She stopped near the doorway watching him. Anderson looked broken tonight. Not violently broken. Emotionally. Like Damien's words reached old wounds still bleeding underneath everything else. Tina walked closer slowly. Then softly asked. What are you thinking? Long silence followed. Then finally. I don't know how to protect him from me. The confession shattered her heart instantly. Tina sat beside him carefully. Andy. He shook his head once. You saw me tonight. Pain crossed his face visibly. You saw what happens when I lose control. Tina looked toward Eli sleeping peacefully. Then back toward Anderson. Yes. Honest. Always honest. Anderson's jaw tightened. I killed people in front of him. The guilt in his voice nearly destroyed her. Because they were trying to hurt him. That doesn't matter. His voice cracked slightly. He still saw it. Silence. Because deep down, that part was true too. Eli saw blood. Violence. Fear. The same things that shaped Anderson. And now Anderson feared history repeating itself. He looked down at his hands quietly. Scarred. Dangerous hands. These hands. His breathing became uneven again. They were never meant to hold children. God. Tina physically felt tears rise instantly. Because Anderson genuinely believed himself unworthy of softness. Unworthy of fatherhood. Unworthy of love. All because Damien poisoned those beliefs into him for years. Tina gently took his hands into hers anyway. I disagree. Anderson laughed softly. Brokenly. You didn't grow up with me. No. Tina's voice trembled carefully. But I grew up loving you. That hit him brutally. Because suddenly, Tina saw both versions of him. The wounded boy and the feared man. And she still stayed. Still chose him. Still loved him. Anderson looked toward her slowly. Then whispered the question truly haunting him. What if Eli becomes like me? Silence filled the room heavily. Tina answered carefully. Then we teach him differently. The simplicity of the answer stunned him. Because Anderson only understood extremes, violence or survival. Not healing. Not softness. Not breaking cycles. Tina touched his cheek gently. You know the biggest difference between you and Damien? Anderson looked unconvinced already. What? You're terrified of hurting Eli. The truth landed heavily. Because yes. That fear consumed him constantly now. Tina continued softly. Damien never feared hurting you. God. The sentence physically hurt. Because suddenly, Anderson realized something horrifying: everything Damien called weakness was actually humanity. Love. Fear. Protection. Guilt. The very things Damien lacked. Eli stirred softly then. Tiny sleepy eyes blinking open slowly. Daddy. The single word instantly softened Anderson's entire face. Tina noticed again. No matter how dark Anderson became, Eli reached him effortlessly. The little boy rubbed his eyes sleepily. Why are you awake? Anderson swallowed hard. Couldn't sleep. Eli frowned slightly. Bad dream. God. Children understood too much sometimes. Anderson looked toward him quietly. Something like that. Eli pushed himself upright slowly. Then reached tiny arms toward Anderson automatically. No hesitation. Just trust. Anderson froze briefly. Then carefully lifted him into his lap. Eli immediately curled against his chest, half asleep. Comfortable there already. Like he belonged. The feeling overwhelmed Anderson painfully. Eli rested his head against Anderson's heartbeat. Then mumbled sleepily. You smell sad. Tina covered her mouth quickly, trying not to cry harder. Because somehow, a child described Anderson perfectly in 3 words. Anderson's arms tightened protectively around him. I'm trying not to be. Eli looked up sleepily. Mom says people stay sad when they think they're bad. Silence crashed through the room. Anderson physically stopped breathing. Because suddenly, it felt like the child looked directly into the ugliest parts of him. Eli touched Anderson's face softly. You're not bad. God. That destroyed him completely. Tears burned instantly behind Anderson's eyes again. Because no one ever said those words to him before and truly meant them. Not once. Eli smiled sleepily afterward. You're just scary sometimes. Victor, standing silently outside the half-open doorway, actually laughed quietly under his breath. Tina smiled through tears. Even Anderson almost laughed weakly. Because honestly, the child wasn't wrong. Eli yawned softly, then wrapped tiny arms around Anderson's neck again. But scary people can still love people. The innocent wisdom shattered the room into silence. Anderson closed his eyes briefly, holding his son tighter. Because suddenly, a 5-year-old child healed something years of violence never could. Not completely. But enough. Enough for Anderson to finally realize, maybe darkness inside him wasn't destiny after all. Maybe it was simply pain that nobody helped him carry sooner. For the first time in years, Anderson slept without nightmares. Not deeply. Not peacefully. But enough. Enough to wake up without blood and screams choking his lungs. And the reason lay curled against him. Eli slept sprawled across Anderson's chest while Tina rested beside them quietly beneath soft morning light. Warmth filled the room. Domestic warmth. The kind Anderson once believed belonged only to other people. Not men like him. He stared silently at the ceiling for several long moments. Listening. Tina's soft breathing. Eli's tiny heartbeat against him. Rain fading outside. Alive. They were alive. The realization hit him differently this morning. Because last night could have ended with blood and funerals. Instead, they were here. Together. God. The thought terrified him. Because now he had something real to lose. Eli shifted sleepily. Then mumbled against Anderson's chest. You're warm. The sleepy complaint almost made Anderson smile. Almost. Tina slowly opened her eyes, watching them quietly. And immediately her chest tightened painfully. Because Anderson looked softer this morning. Not healed. Never healed. But softer. Like fatherhood was slowly reaching places hatred couldn't. Tina brushed Eli's messy hair gently. He kicks in his sleep. Anderson looked genuinely serious. I noticed. The sincerity made her laugh softly. God. This looked too normal. Too beautiful. And that frightened her. Because life never allowed Anderson peaceful things for long. Anderson looked toward her quietly. Then suddenly asked, "Why did you still choose me?" The question surprised her. Not because of the words. Because of the vulnerability behind them. Anderson genuinely didn't understand why she stayed after seeing all his darkness. Tina touched his face softly. Because I know who you are underneath it. Pain flickered across his eyes instantly. And what if there's nothing underneath anymore? God. That sentence shattered her heart. Because he truly feared becoming empty like Damien. Tina leaned closer carefully. Then Eli wouldn't love you like this. The child still slept peacefully against him. Safe. Trusting. Anderson looked down at him silently. Then whispered. He deserves better than me. No. Tina's voice sharpened slightly. He deserves a father who fights to be better. The words settled heavily inside him. Because suddenly, maybe redemption wasn't becoming perfect. Maybe it was simply refusing to stay broken. Eli stirred awake moments later, blinking sleepily. Then immediately smiled, seeing Anderson still there. You stayed. God. That sentence hurt every single time. Anderson gently touched Eli's hair. I told you I would. Eli smiled proudly afterward, like promises actually meant something now. Tina quietly looked away, wiping tears quickly before either noticed. Because children trusted so easily. And Anderson looked at that trust like something sacred. Eli suddenly frowned thoughtfully. Are you still angry? Anderson hesitated. Honesty. Tina watched carefully. Yes. The child looked worried immediately. At Grandpa. Silence. God. Nobody even knew how to explain Damien Kane properly. Anderson carefully chose his words. At people who hurt others. Eli thought about that seriously. Then quietly asked. Did they hurt you too? The room became painfully still. Anderson looked toward the window briefly. Then finally whispered. Yes. Eli looked sad instantly. The little boy reached up, touching the scar near Anderson's jaw softly. Mom says hurt people hurt people. Tina nearly choked hearing her own words repeated back. Anderson stared at Eli in stunned silence. Because somehow, a child understood his entire life already. Eli tilted his head sleepily. But you protected us. The simplicity of it hit hard. Because yes. That was true too. Anderson carried darkness. But he also shielded people from it constantly. Eli hugged him suddenly. You're my dad. God. That nearly broke him again. Not because of biology. Because of acceptance. Unconditional acceptance. Anderson slowly held him tighter. Then quietly admitted something he never thought he'd say aloud. I don't know how to do this. Eli looked confused. Do what? Be somebody good. The honesty devastated Tina completely. Because after everything, Anderson still sounded like a frightened boy asking permission to be loved. Eli thought carefully for several seconds. Then simply said. You already are. Silence. Complete silence. Anderson physically felt tears burn again. Because children didn't care about reputations. Criminal empires. Blood. They cared about who stayed, who protected them, who loved them. And somehow, that was enough for Eli. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Victor entered carefully, holding a tablet in one hand. His expression immediately softened, seeing the three of them together. Interesting. The feared Anderson Kane looked most dangerous when holding a child gently. Victor cleared his throat awkwardly. Sorry to interrupt the emotional healing. Eli grinned immediately. Victor. Victor pointed dramatically. See. The small one likes me. Finally someone appreciates greatness. Eli laughed. Actual laughter. Bright and innocent. The sound filled the room warmly. Anderson watched silently. Because he realized something terrifying. He would kill to keep hearing that laugh. Victor's expression slowly darkened afterward though. Reality returning. What happened? Tina asked immediately. Victor handed the tablet toward Anderson quietly. News headlines flooded the screen. Business tycoon Raymond Carter still missing. Below it. Another headline. Damian Kane denies connection to disappearance. Anderson's jaw tightened instantly. Victor looked grim. He's moving publicly now. Meaning, damage control. Narrative shaping. Manipulation. The Kane Empire was preparing for war. Anderson slowly handed the tablet back. Then another notification appeared. Victor frowned. What? The alderman stared at the screen silently for several long seconds. Then cursed softly. Anderson's eyes darkened. What now? Victor looked up slowly. Martin's missing too. Silence crashed violently through the room. Tina froze instantly. What? Victor's voice lowered carefully. He disappeared sometime last night. God. No. Tina's heartbeat became uneven immediately. Because suddenly, two men connected to the truth vanished within hours. Anderson's expression turned dangerously unreadable. Victor looked toward him carefully. You thinking what I'm thinking? Anderson's voice came quiet. Deadly calm. My father's cleaning the board. And suddenly, everyone understood the horrifying truth. Damian Kane was no longer hiding the war. He was preparing to finish it. Martin woke up tied to a chair. Pain exploded through his skull immediately. Darkness surrounded him except for a single dim bulb hanging from the ceiling above. Cold concrete. Rust. Blood. God. He knew places like this. Which meant only one thing. He'd been taken by professionals. Martin struggled violently against the restraints. Useless. Panic crawled into his chest. Then slowly. Footsteps echoed through the darkness. Measured. Calm. A man stepped into the weak light wearing black gloves and an expensive suit. Damian Kane. Martin stopped breathing. No. Damian remained perfectly composed. You've caused considerable inconvenience. The calmness terrified Martin more than shouting would have. Because Damian Kane looked at people the way businessmen looked at broken equipment. Disposable. Martin swallowed hard. You can't do this. Damian sat slowly across from him. You hired Morelli men. Not a question. Martin's heart pounded violently. Silence betrayed him instantly. Damian sighed softly. Emotions make intelligent men stupid. The insult barely registered through Martin's fear. Where's Raymond Carter? Damian's eyes lifted slowly. Somewhere useful. God. Martin physically felt sickness twist through him. Because suddenly, everything became horrifyingly clear. Raymond knew too much. And now Martin did too. Damian leaned forward slightly. You should have stayed out of family matters. Martin laughed shakily. You ruined that family yourself. Wrong answer. Damian's expression didn't change. That was worse. Love makes people reckless. The alderman calmly removed one glove finger by finger. You nearly exposed years of careful work because you couldn't accept rejection. The humiliation burned. But beneath it, Martin finally realized something terrifying. Damian truly saw emotions as weakness. Even love. Especially love. Martin's breathing quickened. What are you going to do to me? Damian looked genuinely indifferent. That depends. Silence stretched painfully. Then Damian quietly added. Tell me where the files are. Martin froze. Files? What files? Damien noticed instantly. Interesting. He didn't tell you. Martin frowned shakily. Who? Sarah Hale. Anderson's mother. God. Martin suddenly understood. The evidence. The financial records. The hidden information Sarah copied before her death. That's what this entire war was truly about. Damien studied him carefully. She hid copies somewhere before the accident. Martin's blood ran cold. She died protecting evidence. Yes. The answer came emotionlessly. Martin stared at Damien in horror. Because suddenly, he realized Anderson's mother didn't only die because she knew too much. She died because she refused to sell her morality. Damien looked mildly irritated now. Anderson inherited her stubbornness, unfortunately. The casual cruelty made Martin nauseous. You destroyed your own son. For the first time. Damien's eyes sharpened slightly. No. His voice lowered coldly. I perfected him. God. Martin physically recoiled. Because now he understood why Anderson feared becoming his father. Damien genuinely believed suffering created strength. Violence created survival. Love created weakness. Anderson spent his whole life fighting against those beliefs without realizing it. Martin suddenly laughed softly. Brokenly. Damien frowned slightly. What's amusing? Martin lifted exhausted eyes toward him. He'll kill you. Silence. Then Damien smiled faintly. You think love makes him stronger? Martin's heartbeat slowed strangely now. Because suddenly, he realized something Damien never understood. No. Martin whispered quietly. It makes him human. The room became still afterward. Damien looked almost disappointed. Because men like him truly believed humanity weakened people. And that was exactly why Anderson would eventually surpass him. Not despite love. Because of it. Meanwhile, Anderson stood alone on Victor's balcony overlooking the storm-covered city. Hands gripping the railing tightly. Mind spiraling. Raymond missing. Martin missing. Damien moving openly now. War. Real war. Anderson closed his eyes briefly. Then suddenly, soft footsteps approached behind him. Tina. Of course. She always found him when darkness swallowed him too deeply. She stopped beside him quietly. Neither spoke immediately. Rain whispered across the city below. Then softly. You're planning something. Anderson laughed quietly. No humor. When did you become able to read my mind? Tina looked toward him sadly. I learned because I was always scared you'd disappear. God. That hurt. Because yes. He always disappeared when pain became unbearable. Anderson looked away toward the skyline. I don't know how to stop this anymore. The confession came quietly. Honest. Tina's chest tightened painfully. Because beneath all the fearsome reputation, Anderson still sounded overwhelmed. Not evil. Overwhelmed. She touched his arm gently. Then stopped carrying it alone. Silence. Anderson looked down at her hand. Then softly admitted. I'm scared. The vulnerability stunned her. Not because he feared death. Worse. Tina already knew what he feared most. Eli. Anderson nodded once slowly. My father looked at him like. His jaw tightened painfully. Like ownership. The disgust in his voice made her shiver. Because she saw it too. Damien didn't look at Eli with love. He looked at him like legacy. Anderson whispered quietly. I won't let him poison him. The protectiveness in his voice nearly made her cry. Tina stepped closer. You won't. Anderson looked toward her slowly. Then finally voiced the deepest fear inside him. What if I already did? Silence. Rain crashing softly around them. Tina reached up, touching his face carefully. You know what poisoned you most? Anderson looked exhausted now. What? Thinking nobody loved you. God. The truth physically hurt. Because suddenly, he realized Damien didn't only raise him through violence. He raised him through emotional starvation. No affection. No safety. No gentleness. Anderson became dangerous because nobody taught him softness could exist beside strength. Tina's eyes filled softly. But Eli will never grow up that way. The certainty in her voice shook him deeply. Because yes, Eli already had. Love, protection, honesty, warmth. Things Anderson never received. And maybe that changed everything. Anderson suddenly pulled Tina into his arms tightly. Almost desperately. Tina immediately held him back. No hesitation. God. They really loved each other too much. Anderson buried his face briefly against her hair. Then whispered. I don't know how to survive losing you again. The raw honesty shattered her. Because this wasn't obsession anymore. It was vulnerability. Terrifying vulnerability. Tina held him tighter. You won't. But deep down, both of them already knew the truth. The closer they became to peace, the more dangerous the world around them became. The call came at 2:13 a.m. Victor answered first. 1 minute later, he was kicking Anderson's bedroom door open. Get up. Anderson woke instantly. Years of violence made deep sleep impossible. His hand already reached beneath the pillow for a weapon before his eyes fully opened. Victor looked grim. We found Raymond. Everything inside Anderson went cold immediately. Tina sat upright beside him. What? Victor's expression darkened further. He's alive. Relief flashed briefly across Tina's face. Then vanished. Because Victor still looked deeply unsettled. Where is he? Victor hesitated. That alone terrified Anderson. In one of Damien's old storage facilities. Silence. Then Victor added quietly. He's asking for Anderson specifically. 30 minutes later. The convoy stopped outside an abandoned warehouse near the docks. Rain hammered the rusted roof violently while armed guards secured the perimeter. The building looked dead. Forgotten. Perfect for hiding ugly truths. Anderson stepped out first. Cold air hit his face sharply. Victor immediately caught his arm. Careful. Anderson's eyes remained fixed on the warehouse entrance. I'm done being careful. Tina exited the vehicle next. No. Both men looked toward her. Her face looked pale but determined. You are not walking into another trap alone. Anderson's jaw tightened slightly. Tina. I'm coming. Victor almost smiled faintly. God. She really was the only person capable of standing toe-to-toe with Anderson Kane emotionally. Anderson looked exhausted already. You shouldn't be here. Tina stepped closer. And neither should you. Silence. Then Anderson finally nodded once. Defeat. Tiny defeat. But still. Victor muttered under his breath. This relationship will kill all of us. The warehouse smelled like blood and seawater. Dim lights flickered weakly overhead while footsteps echoed through empty corridors. Anderson moved ahead, instinctively shielding Tina slightly behind him. Always protecting. Always alert. Then finally, they found him. Raymond Carter sat chained to a metal chair inside a small concrete room. Bruised. Bleeding. Barely conscious. Tina gasped sharply. Dad. She rushed forward immediately. Raymond slowly lifted swollen eyes toward her. Pain cracked visibly across his face. Tina. Anderson stayed near the doorway silently, watching. Something ugly twisted inside him seeing the men responsible for so much suffering. But then, he noticed something unexpected. Raymond looked terrified. Not of death. Of Anderson. Victor noticed too. Interesting. Raymond stared directly at Anderson now. Then whispered weakly. She looked just like you. The room froze. Anderson's heartbeat slowed dangerously. What? Raymond's shaking hands clenched weakly. Your mother. His voice cracked. She had your eyes. God. That nearly broke something instantly. Because nobody talked about Sarah Hale anymore like she was human. Only tragedy. Only grief. Raymond started crying quietly. Actual tears. Tina looked stunned. Her father almost never cried. She trusted me. Anderson's jaw tightened violently. Then why did you help him? The question exploded through the room harshly. Years of pain behind it. Raymond physically flinched. Because there was no defense good enough. He threatened us. Silence. Victor stepped closer sharply. Who? Damien. The answer came brokenly. Raymond shook visibly now. He said if the files leaked. His breathing became uneven. Morelli would kill everyone connected. Tina's face lost color. What files? Raymond looked toward Anderson slowly. Then whispered. The evidence your mother copied. Anderson stepped forward immediately. Where is it? Raymond closed his eyes briefly. Guilt swallowed his face whole. Your mother gave it to me before the accident. The room went completely still. Tina stared at her father in shock. You had it this whole time. Raymond nodded weakly. She knew Damien was watching her. Anderson's breathing became rough now. Because suddenly, his mother's final days became horrifyingly clear. Fear. Surveillance. Betrayal. Yet she still fought. Raymond continued shakily. She told me if anything happened to her. Tears streamed harder down his bruised face. To protect you. God. That destroyed Anderson instantly. Because his mother's last thoughts were still about him surviving. Not herself. Him. Anderson physically looked away briefly trying to breathe. Tina noticed his hands shaking slightly. Raymond looked toward Anderson again. I failed her. Silence. Then quieter. I failed both of you. The grief in the room became unbearable. Because yes. Everything traced back to fear and cowardice. Raymond feared Damien. Feared Morelli. Feared death. And Sarah Hale paid the price for everyone's fear. Anderson finally spoke again. Low. Raw. Where are the files? Raymond swallowed painfully. Safe deposit box. Victor immediately leaned forward. Where? Raymond looked directly at Anderson. She left the key with something only you would understand. Anderson frowned slightly. What does that mean? Raymond's eyes filled again. She said. A shaky breath. Tell him to look where the stars still wait for her. Silence crashed violently through Anderson. Because instantly, memory hit him. His mother. Late nights. A tiny apartment rooftop. Her voice softly saying. When life hurts too much, look at the stars. They remind us light survives darkness. God. Anderson physically staggered backward slightly. Tina grabbed his arm immediately. Because she saw it. The grief. The realization. Anderson whispered brokenly. The rooftop. Victor immediately understood too. She hid it there. Anderson nodded slowly. Because suddenly, he realized something devastating. His mother knew she was going to die. And she spent her final days trying to leave him a way out. Not into violence. Into truth. Tina's tears fell harder now. Because for the first time, Sarah Hale no longer felt like a ghost-haunting tragedy. She felt real. Brave. Protective. Loving. Anderson closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed. Then suddenly, a gunshot echoed somewhere outside the warehouse. Everyone froze instantly. Victor cursed sharply. Move. Another gunshot exploded. Then screaming. The guards outside. Anderson's expression changed immediately. War again. Victor pulled his weapon instantly. They found us. Anderson grabbed Tina, automatically pulling her behind him. Raymond looked horrified. No. Then finally whispered the truth that chilled everyone completely. Damien never intended to let any of us leave alive. Gunfire exploded outside the warehouse. Rapid. Violent. Close. Victor instantly shoved Tina down behind metal crates while Anderson pulled his weapon with terrifying calmness. Years of survival took over immediately. But tonight, something was different. Because he wasn't only protecting himself anymore. Tina. Eli. Even Raymond. People were depending on him to survive. Anderson looked toward Victor sharply. How many? Victor listened briefly to the chaos outside. Too many. Another burst of gunfire echoed violently through the warehouse corridors. Then screaming. One of Victor's men. Dead. Tina physically trembled beside the crates. Anderson noticed instantly. He crouched quickly in front of her. Both hands gripping her face gently despite the violence surrounding them. Listen to me. His voice remained terrifyingly calm. You stay behind me no matter what happens. Tina grabbed his wrist desperately. You can't fight all of them. Anderson's eyes darkened. Yes, I can. The certainty frightened her. Because she knew he meant it. Victor reloaded nearby. We need to move now. Anderson turned sharply toward Raymond. Can you walk? The older man nodded weakly. Barely. Then suddenly, heavy footsteps thundered through the hallway outside. Approaching fast. Victor's expression hardened. They're inside. Gunfire ripped through the doorway instantly. Metal sparks exploded across the room. Anderson fired back immediately. Precise. Lethal. One attacker dropped before fully entering. Another screamed. But more kept coming. Too many. Victor cursed harshly. This is Morelli's private crew. Professional killers. Not street criminals. War specialists. Anderson's mind calculated rapidly. Exit points. Distances. Tina's position. Raymond's injuries. Protect Eli's mother. Protect the truth. Protect the future. Everything narrowed violently into survival. Another attacker burst through the side entrance. Anderson moved instantly. Brutal. Efficient. The knife slid across the man's throat before Tina could even fully process the movement. Blood splattered across concrete. Tina gasped sharply. Anderson looked terrifying again. Cold. Fast. Deadly. But the moment he turned toward her, concern replaced the violence instantly. Are you hurt? God. The contrast nearly broke her emotionally. Even covered in blood. His first instinct remained protecting her. Victor suddenly shouted. Down. A grenade rolled violently across the floor. Everything exploded. The warehouse shook brutally. Tina screamed. Smoke swallowed the room instantly. Concrete cracked overhead. Anderson's entire body slammed over Tina, automatically shielding her from debris. Pain exploded through his shoulder again. But he didn't move. Didn't care. Only checked her breathing. Tina. She coughed violently beneath him. I'm okay. Another gunshot interrupted. Victor fired back through smoke. We're losing the exit. Anderson looked around rapidly. The building was collapsing slowly. Fire spread across broken crates nearby. Raymond coughed blood weakly against the wall. Chaos. Pure chaos. Then suddenly, a masked attacker emerged directly through the smoke aiming toward Tina. Anderson reacted without thinking. Bang. The men dropped instantly. But another attacker appeared behind him simultaneously. Too close. Too fast. Gun raised directly toward Anderson's back. Tina saw it first. Her heartbeat stopped. Andy. The gun fired. Everything slowed. Anderson turned too late. Then suddenly, Raymond Carter lunged between them. The bullet tore through his chest violently. Silence exploded through the room. Tina screamed. Her father collapsed hard against the concrete floor, gasping weakly. No, no, no. Anderson stared in shock. Raymond looked toward him through blood and pain. Then whispered the sentence changing everything forever. I owed her this. God. The grief in those words shattered the room. Because after all the fear, all the cowardice, all the failures, Raymond Carter finally chose courage. Anderson immediately shot the attacker dead. But it didn't matter anymore. Tina crawled toward her father, sobbing violently. Dad. Raymond's trembling hand found hers weakly. Then slowly, his eyes lifted toward Anderson again. You were never the monster. The sentence physically froze him. Raymond coughed blood harder now. Your mother. A painful breath. She was proud of you. God. That destroyed Anderson completely. Because he spent years believing his mother died disappointed in him. Ashamed. Instead, she still loved him. Even knowing what he became. Tears burned instantly behind Anderson's eyes again. Victor grabbed his shoulder sharply. We have to go. More gunfire echoed outside. The warehouse fire spread rapidly now. The building wouldn't hold much longer. Tina cried helplessly, holding her father. We can't leave him. Raymond weakly squeezed her hand. Yes. Her face crumpled instantly. No. Raymond looked toward Anderson one final time. Then whispered. Protect them better than we protected her. Silence. Anderson physically felt those words carve themselves into his soul. Because suddenly, he understood. This wasn't only revenge anymore. It was responsibility. Breaking the cycle. Choosing differently. Victor shouted again. Move. The ceiling cracked violently overhead. More debris crashed down. Anderson made the hardest choice of his life then. He grabbed Tina tightly despite her screams. We have to go. No. Tina fought him desperately. My father. He's saving us. The raw pain in Anderson's voice stunned her. Because he understood this sacrifice too well. Raymond looked peaceful suddenly despite the blood. Like dying for something finally freed him from years of guilt. Anderson dragged Tina through the smoke while Victor covered them with gunfire. The warehouse roared with fire behind them. Tina sobbed violently against Anderson's chest. Anderson held her tighter despite his own shaking hands. Because deep down, he knew exactly what she was feeling. The pain of losing a parent while unfinished love still existed between them. They barely escaped before the warehouse exploded behind them completely. Flames consumed the night sky violently. Victor shoved everyone into the vehicles immediately. Go. As the convoy sped away into the storm, Anderson stared silently at the burning warehouse through the rear window. Something inside him changed forever tonight. Not softer. Stronger. Because for the first time, he realized revenge alone would never heal him. But protecting the people he loved still might. Tina did not speak the entire drive home. She sat curled against the car door silently crying while rain blurred the city outside. Anderson watched her helplessly. God. He knew this pain too well. The numbness. The disbelief. The feeling that the world continued moving after stealing someone important. Victor drove quietly in front while armed vehicles surrounded them. Nobody spoke. Even the guards understood grief lived inside the car now. Tina finally whispered brokenly. I screamed at him before he disappeared. The confession shattered Anderson's heart instantly. He died thinking I hated him. No. The answer came immediately. Fiercely. Tina looked toward him through tears. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Anderson's voice softened painfully. He died saving you. Silence. Because deep down, that truth mattered. Raymond Carter made his final choice out of love. Not fear. Not guilt. Love. Tina buried her face into trembling hands again. Anderson physically struggled not to pull her into his arms immediately. Not because he didn't want to. Because he understood grief sometimes needed space to breathe. Still. His entire body ached seeing her cry like this. Victor's phone suddenly rang through the silence. The older man answered quickly. Then frowned sharply. What? Anderson looked up immediately. Victor slowly lowered the phone afterward. His expression unreadable. What happened? Anderson asked. Victor looked toward him carefully. One of our men reached the rooftop apartment. Silence. The rooftop. Sarah Hale's hiding place. Anderson's heartbeat slowed dangerously. And Victor reached into his coat slowly. Then handed over a small rusted key attached to a faded silver star charm. The moment Anderson saw it, he stopped breathing completely. God. He remembered it instantly. His mother used to wear that charm around her neck constantly. When he was little, he asked why she loved stars so much. And she smiled softly saying, because even the darkest skies still make room for light. Anderson physically felt grief crush his chest. His fingers trembled slightly holding the tiny charm. Tina looked toward him quietly. He kept it all these years. Victor nodded once. Your mother hid it beneath a loose tile on the rooftop. Anderson closed his eyes briefly. Because suddenly, he could picture her there alone. Terrified. Preparing for death. Still thinking about him. Still trying to protect him. The realization hurt too much. Victor handed over another item carefully. A sealed envelope. Old. Yellowed with age. Anderson stared at it silently. His name written across the front in his mother's handwriting. For my son. The entire world disappeared around him. Tina immediately covered her mouth seeing his expression. Because Anderson suddenly looked like a child again. Not a feared man. Just a son holding the last thing his mother ever left him. His hands visibly shook now. He couldn't open it. Couldn't breathe properly enough to try. Tina quietly moved closer. Then gently touched his arm. You don't have to do it alone. God. That nearly broke him completely. Because yes. For once. He didn't have to survive grief alone anymore. Anderson finally opened the envelope carefully. Inside sat a folded letter stained slightly by time. His mother's scent was long gone. But somehow, it still felt like her. Anderson unfolded the paper slowly. Then began reading. My sweet boy. If you are reading this, then life has already hurt you more than I ever wanted. First, forgive me. Forgive me for leaving you alone in a world that was never kind to us. I tried so hard to protect you from men like Damian Kane and the darkness surrounding him, but I was already trapped long before you were born. Anderson's vision blurred instantly. Tina quietly took his free hand. Holding him steady. He kept reading. You were never a mistake, Anderson. Never. You were the only beautiful thing that ever happened to me. The day you were born was the first day I stopped fearing life completely. God. A broken sound escaped Anderson's throat before he could stop it. Victor quietly looked away, giving him privacy. But even he looked affected now. Anderson continued shakily. I know you will grow angry one day. I know this world will try to poison your heart. But please listen to me carefully. You are not your father. No matter what you become to survive, your soul was never born cruel. Tears slid silently down Anderson's face now. Because those words hit directly into every fear Damien planted inside him. Not your father. Not your father. Not your father. The sentence repeated violently through his mind. Tina cried softly beside him too. Because somehow, Sarah Hale still sounded like she was protecting him even from the grave. Anderson wiped roughly at his face before continuing. Love deeply, my son. Even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. Men who stop loving become dangerous to themselves and everyone around them. Promise me you will not let pain turn you into stone. God. That shattered him. Because that was exactly what happened. He became stone. Cold. Violent. Emotionally empty. Everything his mother feared. And yet, somehow Tina and Eli still reached him anyway. Anderson's breathing became uneven. He read the final line slowly. If someday you find someone who looks at you and still sees light, stay. Don't run the way I did. Don't let fear steal your happiness. You deserve love too. And if you ever have a child, hold them gently. Break this curse our family carries. Let your child grow up knowing softness. Promise me. I love you beyond death. Mom. Silence filled the car completely afterward. Anderson lowered the letter slowly. Emotion destroyed him entirely now. Because suddenly, everything became painfully clear. His mother never wanted revenge. She wanted healing. She wanted him free. Free from Damien. Free from hatred. Free from becoming empty. Tina gently touched his tear-streaked face. Anderson looked toward her like he was drowning. Then finally whispered the truth that terrified him most. I think I've spent my whole life becoming the exact thing she feared. No. Tina's answer came instantly. She grabbed the letter carefully. Then pointed toward one line. If someday you find someone who looks at you and still sees light, stay. Tina's eyes filled softly. She knew you'd survive this. Anderson's chest physically hurt. Because suddenly, he realized something devastating. His mother believed in the men he could become, long before he ever did. Victor quietly cleared his throat afterward. There's something else. Both looked toward him. Victor's expression turned grim again. The key opens a safe deposit box downtown. Anderson's jaw tightened slightly. The evidence. Victor nodded once. But Damien's men are already searching for it. Silence settled heavily again. Then slowly, Anderson folded his mother's letter carefully against his chest. Protectively. Like something sacred. And for the first time in years, his next decision wouldn't be driven by hatred. It would be driven by the promise he silently made to her. He would not let darkness inherit Eli too. The bank opened at exactly 8 a.m. By 7:15, Anderson already stood across the street watching the building through dark-tinted windows. Rain still lingered lightly over the city while Victor's men occupied surrounding rooftops and vehicles. Everything about today felt dangerous. Because Damien Kane wanted those files desperately. Which meant whatever Sarah Hale copied years ago could destroy empires. Tina sat beside Anderson quietly holding the silver star charm in her hand. She kept rubbing her thumb over it absent-mindedly. Grief. Exhaustion. Fear. Everything still lived inside her eyes. Anderson hated that. He hated how much pain surrounded everyone near him. Victor adjusted an earpiece from the front seat. Movement on the east entrance. Anderson's expression sharpened instantly. How many? 3 black vehicles. Damien's men. Of course. Anderson looked toward Tina immediately. You stay here. No. The refusal came instantly. God. She really had stopped fearing him completely. Anderson rubbed tiredly at his jaw. Tina. I'm done staying behind while everyone bleeds for secrets. The raw pain in her voice silenced him. Because yes. Her father died protecting these files too. This belonged to her now as much as him. Victor sighed dramatically. You two argue like an old married couple during gunfights. Very unsettling. Neither answered. Because tension already consumed the car again. Anderson finally looked toward Tina carefully. If anything goes wrong, I run. Immediately. Tina nodded once. But deep down, both knew she wouldn't leave him easily anymore. That frightened Anderson more than bullets. Victor's voice suddenly lowered. They're moving. Across the street. Men in dark suits entered the bank calmly. Too calm. Professionals. Anderson immediately recognized Morelli's private crew. His jaw tightened. They know. Victor looked grim. Looks like it. Silence followed. Then Anderson quietly opened the car door. Tina stays with you. Victor frowned slightly. And you? Anderson's eyes darkened. I'm ending this before someone else dies. Inside the bank. Everything looked painfully normal. Employees. Customers. Morning conversations. No one realizing predators moved among them. Anderson entered silently through the side access wearing a dark coat and gloves. Every instinct sharpened. The safe deposit section sat underground. 2 Morelli men already guarded the hallway casually pretending to be clients. Amateurs would miss it. Anderson didn't. He moved smoothly down the corridor. One guard noticed him too late. The knife struck silently beneath the ribs. Fast. Precise. The second guard reached for a weapon. Anderson slammed him brutally into the wall before he could react. Unconscious instantly. No gunshots. Not yet. Anderson breathed slowly, trying to stay focused. Not rage. Control. His mother's words echoed violently inside him. Don't let pain turn you into stone. God. Too late for that. Still. He kept moving. The vault room waited ahead. 3 more men stood near the deposit boxes already searching frantically. One looked up sharply. Kane. Recognition flashed. Then weapons. Everything exploded instantly. Gunfire ripped through the room. Customers screamed upstairs. Anderson moved like violence itself. Fast. Lethal. One attacker dropped immediately. Another slammed hard into steel lockers. The third fired wildly. Bullet grazing Anderson's side sharply. Pain exploded. He ignored it. Because suddenly, all he could think about was Eli. Not growing up fatherless. Not becoming another broken child buried beneath violence. Anderson disarmed the final attacker brutally, then pinned him hard against the vault wall. Who sent you? Blood dripped from the man's mouth. You already know. Damien. Of course. The attacker smiled weakly despite the pain. He says the boy belongs to the bloodline. Something inside Anderson snapped violently. His son was not legacy. Not property. Not inheritance. Eli was a child. A little boy who loved toy cars and hated vegetables. Not another Kane weapon. Anderson's grip tightened dangerously. He's nothing like us. The attacker laughed softly. You really believe blood doesn't win eventually? God. That sentence hit too close. Because wasn't that exactly what Anderson feared too? Darkness passing downward. Violence inherited. The hesitation lasted one fatal second too long. Another gunshot erupted from behind. Anderson turned sharply. Just as Damien Kane stepped calmly into the vault room holding a weapon. Everything stopped. Father. Son. Finally alone. Damien looked entirely composed despite the bodies around them. You disappoint me. Anderson slowly straightened. Blood soaking through his shirt now. You sent killers into my son's life. Damien's eyes remained cold. He is Kane blood. No. The denial exploded instantly. He's my son. Silence filled the vault heavily. Then Damien quietly spoke the sentence Anderson feared most. You love him more than survival. God. That was true. Terrifyingly true. Anderson would die for Eli without hesitation now. Damien studied him calmly. That makes you weak. Anderson looked toward the deposit boxes briefly. Then slowly back at his father. And for the first time in years, he understood something clearly. Damien genuinely believed love and weakness were the same thing. That's why he destroyed everyone who loved him. That's why he killed Sarah emotionally long before she died physically. And suddenly, Anderson no longer wanted to become stronger than Damien. He wanted to become different. The realization changed everything. Damien raised the gun slightly. Give me the key. Anderson reached slowly into his pocket. Damien's eyes sharpened instantly. But instead of pulling the key, Anderson pulled out his mother's letter. The older man frowned slightly. What is that? Anderson looked down at the worn paper quietly. Then softly laughed. Not broken this time. Sad. She spent her whole life trying to save me from becoming you. Silence. Damien's expression hardened slightly. Anderson slowly lifted his eyes again. You know the difference between us. Damien remained still. I would rather die. His voice lowered painfully. Than make Eli fear love the way you did. The words landed like a knife. Because for the first time, Anderson stopped fighting to prove he was strong. He fought to protect softness instead. Damien noticed the change immediately. And hated it. Because suddenly, his son no longer looked like a weapon. He looked like a man. And men willing to love despite pain became impossible to fully control. Damien's finger tightened slightly on the trigger. You think morality will save you? No. Anderson's eyes darkened. But maybe it'll save my son. Then suddenly, he tossed the safe deposit key directly into one of the industrial incinerator vents nearby. Damien's expression changed instantly. The key vanished into flames. Gone. The evidence inaccessible now. Everyone froze. Victor burst into the room seconds later, weapon raised. Then stopped in shock. What did you do? Anderson kept his eyes locked on Damien. I ended it. Silence crashed violently through the vault. Because suddenly, the war was no longer about power or revenge. Anderson made a choice. Not to inherit hatred. Not to let darkness keep spreading. Even if it cost him the truth. Even if it cost him justice. For the first time in his life, Anderson Kane chose love over destruction completely. Nobody spoke during the drive back. Victor looked stunned. Tina looked emotional. Anderson looked exhausted beyond words. Not physically. Soul-deep exhaustion. Like he had spent his entire life carrying rage only to finally set it down. The city blurred quietly outside while blood slowly soaked through the bandage near his side again. Tina noticed immediately. You're bleeding. Anderson barely looked down. I know. Victor cursed sharply from the front seat. You got shot again and decided not to mention it. Anderson leaned his head back tiredly. It wasn't important. Tina stared at him in disbelief. You could have died. Silence. Then quietly. I almost wanted to. The confession shattered the car. Victor looked sharply through the mirror. Tina's eyes instantly filled with tears. Because Anderson didn't say it dramatically. He sounded tired. Like a man who spent too long surviving without understanding why. Tina grabbed his hand tightly. Don't ever say that again. Anderson slowly looked toward her. Pain lived openly inside his eyes now. My mother died protecting truth. A pause. Raymond died trying to fix his mistakes. His jaw tightened slightly. And I almost destroyed myself trying to avenge both of them. God. The grief in his voice physically hurt. Tina touched his face carefully. But you didn't. Silence. Because yes. That mattered too. For the first time. Anderson walked away from hatred willingly. Not because he lost. Because he chose differently. Victor drove quietly for several moments. Then finally muttered. Your mother would have slapped you for throwing the key away though. A shocked laugh escaped Tina unexpectedly through tears. Even Anderson almost smiled faintly. Almost. Victor sighed dramatically. Years of criminal conspiracies. Gone. Burned. Anderson looked toward the rain quietly. No. Both looked at him. The truth still exists. His voice softened slightly. In me. God. That sentence landed heavily. Because suddenly. Anderson understood, justice wasn't only exposing monsters publicly. Sometimes it was refusing to become one yourself. When they reached Victor's estate, Eli came running the moment the doors opened. Daddy. Anderson physically softened instantly. The exhaustion. The darkness. The grief. Everything cracked open the second the child threw tiny arms around him. Anderson crouched carefully despite the pain, pulling Eli close immediately. God. This felt real. Too real. Eli frowned almost instantly though. You look hurt again. Victor muttered under his breath. The child notices everything. Terrifying. Tina smiled weakly through tears. Anderson gently touched Eli's hair. I'm okay. Lie. But softer this time. Eli studied him seriously. Did you fight bad people? Silence. Anderson looked toward Tina briefly. Then back at Eli. Yeah. The little boy looked sad immediately. Did you win? God. That question. Anderson thought about it carefully. Really carefully. Because for years, winning meant violence, fear, revenge, survival. But today felt different. Anderson slowly smiled for the first time in a very long time. Small. Tired. Real. Yes. Eli grinned proudly. I knew it. Then suddenly hugged Anderson again tightly. Anderson closed his eyes briefly, holding him. Because no victory in his entire violent life ever felt like this. None. Victor quietly walked away, giving them space. For once. Even he looked emotional. Tina stood nearby silently watching Anderson laugh softly when Eli started rambling about toy cars again. The sight shattered her beautifully. Because after everything, he still found his way back to love. Her eyes burned softly. Anderson noticed immediately. He always noticed. What? Tina walked closer slowly. Then gently touched the side of his face. You came home. God. That nearly broke him completely. Because no one had ever called him home before. Not truly. Anderson looked toward Eli, smiling in his arms, Tina standing beside him, warm safety peace. The things he spent his whole life believing he didn't deserve. Then quietly, almost disbelievingly, he whispered, yeah. Tina kissed him softly. No desperation this time. No heartbreak. Just love. Steady. Certain. Anderson melted into it immediately. Because finally, he stopped kissing her like someone afraid she'd disappear tomorrow. When they pulled apart, Eli looked deeply offended. Gross. Victor burst out laughing somewhere behind them. Tina actually laughed too. Real laughter. Warm and alive. And Anderson. God. Anderson laughed with them. The sound echoed softly through the house. And for the first time since his mother died, it didn't sound broken anymore. Months later, the city still whispered Anderson Cain's name with fear. The underworld still respected him. Damian Cain eventually disappeared from public life after losing control of his empire piece by piece. Nobody knew exactly what happened. Anderson never spoke about it. Because revenge stopped mattering eventually. Some wounds healed quieter than war. Tina reopened a small foundation in her father's memory helping workers abused by powerful corporations. Victor complained constantly while secretly funding half of it. And Eli. Eli grew up loved. Completely. Fiercely. Softly. Exactly the way Anderson never was. Some nights Anderson still woke from nightmares. Still carried scars. Still feared the darkness inside himself. But now, small footsteps always followed afterward. Tiny arms wrapped around him sleepily. And a little voice always whispered, "You came back." Every single time. Anderson held his son tighter and silently thanked the woman who once wrote, "Don't let fear steal your happiness." Because in the end, love did not erase Anderson's darkness. It simply taught him he was never meant to carry it alone. And maybe that was enough. The end.